Bleak House by Charles Dickens, Chapter 40, National and Domestic. England has been in a dreadful state for some weeks. Lord Coodle would go out, Sir Thomas Doodle wouldn't come in, and there being nobody in Great Britain to speak of except Coodle and Doodle, there had been no government. It is a mercy that the hostile meeting between these two great men, which at one time seemed inevitable, did not come off, because if both pistols had taken effect and Coodle and Doodle had killed each other, it is to be presumed that England must have waited to be governed until young Coodle and young Doodle, now in frocks and long stockings, were grown up. This stupendous national calamity, however, was averted by Lord Coodle's making the timely discovery that if in the heat of debate he had said that he scorned and despised the whole ignoble career of Sir Thomas Doodle, he had merely meant to say that party differences should never induce him to withhold from it tribute to his warmest admiration. Well, while it had opportunely turned out that Sir Thomas Doodle had in his own bosom expressly booked Lord Coodle to go down in posterity as the mirror of virtue and honor, still England has been some weeks in the dismal strait of having no pilot to weather the storm, and the marvelous part of the matter is that England has not appeared to care very much about it, but has gone on eating and drinking and marrying and giving in marriage as the old world did in the days before the flood. At last Sir Thomas Doodle has not only condescended to come in, but has done it handsomely, bringing in with him all his nephews, all his male cousins, and all his brothers-in-law, so there is hope for the old ship yet. Doodle has found that he must throw himself upon the country, chiefly in the form of sovereigns and beer. In this metamorphized state he is available in a good many places simultaneously, and can throw himself upon a considerable portion of the country at one time. Britannia being much occupied in pocketing Doodle in the form of sovereigns, and swallowing Doodle in the form of beer, and in swearing herself black in the face that she does neither, plainly to the advancement of her glory and morality, the London season comes to a sudden end, though all the Doodleites and Coodleites aspiring to assist Britannia in these religious exercises. Hence Mrs. Rouncewell, housekeeper at Chesney Wold, foresees, though no instructions have yet come down, that the family may shortly be expected together, with a pretty large accession of cousins and others, who can in any way assist the great constitutional work, and hence the stately old dame, taking time by the forelock, leads him up and down the staircases, and along the galleries and passages, and through the rooms, to witness, before he grows any older, that everything is prepared, and beseems the deadlock dignity. This present summer evening, as the sun goes down, the preparations are complete. Dreary and solemn the old house looks, with so many appliances of habitation, and with no inhabitants except the pictured forms upon the walls. Through some of the fiery windows, beautiful from without, and set at this sunset hour, not in dull grey stone, but in a glorious house of gold, the light excluded at all other windows pours in, rich, lavish, overflowing, like the summer plenty in the land. Then do the frozen deadlocks thaw. Strange movements come upon their features as the shadows of leaves play there. A dense justice in a corner is beguiled into a wink. A staring baronet with a truncheon gets a dimple in his chin. Down into the bosom of a stony shepherdess there steals a flock of light and warmth that would have done it good 100 years ago. But the fire of the sun is dying. Even now the floor is dusky, and shadows slowly mounts on the wall, bringing the deadlocks down like age and death. And now, upon my lady's picture, over the great chimney-piece, a weird shade falls from some old tree that turns it pale, and flatters it, and looks as if a great arm held a veil or hood, watching an opportunity to draw it over her. Higher and darker rises shadow on the wall, now a red gloom on the ceiling, now the fire is out. All that prospect which from the terrace looked so near has moved solemnly away and changed into a distant phantom. Light mists arise, and the dew falls, and all the sweet scents in the garden are heavy in the air. Now the woods settle into great masses, as if they were each one profound tree, and now the moon rises to separate them, and to make the avenue a pavement of light among high cathedral arches fantastically broken. Now the moon is high, and the great house, needing habitation more than ever, is like a body without life. Now it is even awful, stealing through it, to think of the live people who have slept in the solitary bedrooms, to say nothing of the dead. Now is the time for shadow, when every corner is a cavern and every downward step a pit, when the stained glass is reflected in pale and faded hues upon the floors, when anything and everything can be made of the heavy staircase beams accepting their own proper shapes, when the armor has dull lights upon it, not easily to be distinguished from stealthy movement. But of all the shadows in Chesney Wold, the shadow in the long drawing room upon my lady's picture is the first to come, the last to be disturbed. At this hour, and by this light, it changes into threatening hands, raised up and menacing in the handsome face of with every breath that stirs. "She is not well, ma'am," says a groom to Mrs. Rouncewell's audience chamber. "My lady not well? What's the matter?" "Why, my lady has been poorly, ma'am, since she was last here. I don't mean with the family, ma'am, but when she was here as a bird of passage like, my lady has not been out much for her, and has kept her room a good deal." "Chesney Wold, Thomas," rejoins the housekeeper with proud complacency, "will set my lady up. There is no finer air and no healthier soil in the world." Thomas may have his own personal opinions on the subject, but he forbears to express them further, and retires to the servants' hall, to regale on cold meat pie and ale. This groom is the pilot fish before the nobler shark. Next evening, down comes Sir Lychester and my lady with their largest retinue, and down come the cousins and others from all the points of the compass. Thenceforth, for some weeks, backward and forward rush mysterious men with no names, who fly about all these particular parts of the country on which Doodle is at present throwing himself in an aurifurious and malty shower, but who are merely persons of a restless disposition and never do anything anywhere. On these national occasions Sir Leicester finds the cousins useful. A better man than the Honourable Bob Stables to meet the hunt at dinner there could not possibly be. Better got up gentlemen than the other cousins to ride over the polling booths and hustings here and there and show themselves on the side of England, it would be hard to find. Volumnia is a little dim, but she is of the true descent, and there are many who appreciate her sprightly conversation, the honor of taking the fair Dedlock into dinner, or even the privilege of her hand in the dance. On these national occasions, dancing may be a patriotic service, and Volumnia is constantly seen hopping about for the good of an ungrateful and unpensioning country. My lady takes no great pains to entertain the numerous guests, and, being still unwell, rarely appears until late in the day. But at all the dismal dinners, leaden lunches, basilisk balls, and other melancholy pageants, her mere appearance is a relief. As to Sir Leicester, he conceives it utterly impossible that anything can be waiting in any direction by anyone who has the good fortune to be received under that roof. And in a state of sublime satisfaction he moves among the company, a magnificent refrigerator. Daily the cousins trot through dust and canter over roadside turf, away to hustings and polling booths. Daily bring back reports on where Sir Leicester holds forth after dinner. Daily the restless men who have no occupation in life present the appearance of being rather busy. Daily Volumnia has a little cousinly talk with Sir Leicester on the state of the nation, from which Sir Leicester is disposed to conclude that Volumnia is a more reflecting woman than he had thought her. "How are we getting on?" says Miss Volumnia, clasping her hands. "Are we safe?" "Volumnia," replies Sir Leicester, "we are doing tolerably." "At least there is no opposition to you," Volumnia asserts with confidence. "No, Volumnia, this distracted country has lost its sense in many respects, I grieve to say, but it is not so mad as that. I am glad to hear it." Volumnia, finishing the sentence, restores her to her favour. Sir Leicester, with a gracious inclination of his head, seems to say to himself, "A sensible woman this, on the whole, though occasionally precipitate." In fact, As to this question of opposition, the fair Dedlock's observation was superfluous, Sir Lychester on these occasions always delivering in his own candidateship as a kind of handsome wholesale order to be promptly executed 2 other little seats that belong to him. He treats as retail orders of less importance, merely sending down the men and signifying to the tradespeople, "You will have the goodness to make these materials into the 2 members of Parliament and send them home when done." I regret to say, Volumnia. Actually, it's not Volumnia, it's Volumnia. So we'll say it that way. I regret to say, Volumnia, that in many places the people have shown a bad spirit, and that this opposition to the government has been a most determined and most implacable description. "Wretches," says Volumnia. "Even," proceeds Sir Lychester, glancing at the circumjacent cousins on sofas and ottomans, "even in many, in fact, in most of those places in which the government has carried it against a fraction." Note, by the way, that the Coodleites are always a faction with the Dudelites, and that the Dudelites occupy exactly the same position toward the Coodleites. "Even in them I am shocked, for the credit of Englishmen, to be constrained to inform you that the party has not triumphed without being put to an enormous expense, hundreds," says Sir Lychester, eyeing the cousins with increasing dignity and swelling indignation, "hundreds of thousands of pounds. If Volumnia have a fault, it is a fault of being a trifle too innocent. Impelled by innocence, she asks, 'What for?' "Volumnia," remonstrates Sir Lychester with the utmost severity. "Volumnia!" No, I don't mean what for," cries Volumnia with her favourite little scream. "How stupid I am! I mean, what a pity!" "I am glad," returns Sir Lychester, "that you do mean what a pity. It is disgraceful to the electors. But, as you, though inadvertently and without intending so unreasonable a question, asked me what for, let me reply to you, for necessary expenses, and I trust to your good sense, Volumnia, not to pursue the subject here or elsewhere." Sir Lychester feels it incumbent on him to observe a crushing aspect towards Volumnia, because it is whispered abroad that these necessary expenses will, in some 200 election petitions, be unpleasantly connected with the word bribery. "I suppose," offers Volumnia, "Mr. Tolkiehorn has been worked to death." "I don't know," says Sir Lychester, opening his eyes, "why Mr. Tolkiehorn should be worked to death. I don't know why Mr. Tolkiehorn's engagement. I don't know what Mr. Tolkiehorn's engagements may be. He is not a candidate." Lady Dedlock, seated at an open window, with her arm upon its cushioned ledge, looking out at the evening shadow falling on the park, has seemed to attend since the lawyer's name was mentioned. A languid cousin with a moustache, in a state of extreme debility, now observes from the couch, "That man told him, Yazdi, that Tolkiehorn has gone down to that iron place to give legal opinion about something, and that contest being over today, 'twould be highly jolly thing if Tolkiehorn should peer with the news that Coodleman was floored." Mercury, in attendance with coffee, informs Sir Lychester hereupon that Mr. Tolkiehorn has arrived and is taking dinner. My lady turns her head inward for the moment, then looks out again as before. "Mr. Tolkiehorn," says Sir Lychester, "is always welcome here, and always discreet whensoever he is. A very valuable person and deservedly respected, the debilitated cousin supposes he is." "Enormously rich, He has a stake in the country," says Mr. Lychester. "I have no doubt. He is, of course, handsomely paid, and he associates almost on a footing of equality with the highest society." Everybody starts, for a gun is fired close by. "Good gracious, what's that?" cries Volumnia with her little withered scream. "A rat," says my lady, "and they have shot him." Enter Mr. Tolkiehorn, followed by Mercuries with lamps and candles. No, no, says Sir Leicester, I think not. My lady, do you object to the twilight? On the contrary, my lady prefers it. Then take them away, says Sir Leicester. Tulkinghorn, I beg your pardon. How do you do? Mr. Tulkinghorn, with his usual leisurely ease, advances, renders his passing homage to my lady, shakes Sir Leicester's hand, and subdues into the chair proper to him when he has anything to communicate, on the opposite side of the baronet little newspaper table. Sir Leicester is apprehensive that my lady, not being very well, will take cold at that open window. My lady is obliged to him, but would rather sit there for the air. Sir Leicester rises, adjusts her scarf about her, and returns to his seat. Mr. Tulkinghorn, in the meanwhile, takes a pinch of snuff. Now, says Sir Leicester, how has the contest gone? Oh, hollow from the beginning, not a chance. They have brought in both their people. You are beaten out of all reason, 3-1. It is a part of Mr. Tulkinghorn's policy and mastery to have no political opinions, indeed no opinions. Therefore, he says, you are beaten, and not we. Sir Leicester is majestically worth. Volumnia never heard of such a thing. It's the place, you know, Mr. Tulkinghorn goes on to say, in the fast increasing darkness, where they wanted to put Mrs. Rouncewell's son. A proposal which, as you correctly informed me at the time, he had the becoming taste and perception, observes Sir Leicester, to decline. I cannot say that I by any means approve of the sentiments expressed by Mr. Rouncewell when he was here for some half hour in this room, but there is a sense of propriety in his decision which I am glad to acknowledge. Ha! Says Mr. Tulkinghorn. It did not prevent him from being very active in this election, though. Sir Leicester is distinctly heard to gasp before speaking. Did I understand you? Did you say that Mr. Rouncewell has been very active in this election? Uncommonly active. Against... Oh, dear, yes, against you. He is a very good speaker, plain and emphatic. He made a damaging effect, and has great influence in the business part of the proceedings. He carried all before him. It is evident to the whole company, though nobody can see him, that Sir Leicester is... it is evident to the whole company, though nobody can see him, that Sir Leicester is staring majestically. And he was much assisted, says Mr. Tulkinghorn as a wind-up, by his son. By his son, sir, repeats Sir Leicester with awful politeness. The son who wished to marry the young woman in my lady's service. That son, he has but one. Then, upon my honour, says Sir Leicester, after a terrific pause, during which he has been heard to snort and felt to stare, upon my reputation and principles, the floodgates of society are burst open, and the waters have obliterated the landmarks of the framework of the cohesion by which these things are held together. A general burst of cousinly indignation. I beg, says Sir Leicester in a breathless condition, that we may not comment further on this circumstance. Comment is superfluous. My lady, let me suggest in reference to that young woman... I have no intention, observes my lady from her window in a low but decided tone, of parting with her. That was not my meaning, returns Sir Leicester. I am glad to hear you say so. I would suggest that you think her worthy of your patronage. You should exert your influence to keep her from these dangerous hands. You might show her what violence would be done in such association to her duties and principles, and you might preserve her for a better fate. You might point out that she probably would, in good time, find a husband at Chesney Wold by whom she would not be, Sir Leicester adds after a moment's consideration, dragged from the altars of her forefathers. These remarks he offers with unvarying politeness and deference. When he addresses himself to his wife, she merely moves her head in reply. The moon is rising, and where she sits there is a little stream of cold pale light in which her head is seen. It is worthy of remark, says Mr. Tulkinghorn, however, that these people are, in their way, very proud. Proud? Sir Leicester doubts his hearing. I should not be surprised if they all voluntarily abandoned the girl. Yes, lover and all, instead of her abandoning them, supposing she remained at Chesney Wold under such circumstances. Well, says Sir Leicester tremulously, well, you should know, Mr. Tulkinghorn, you have been among them. Really, Sir Leicester, returns the lawyer, I state the fact. Why, I could tell you a story, with Lady Dedlock's permission. Her head concedes it. Sir Leicester, these particulars have only lately become known to me. They are very brief. They exemplify what I have said, I suppose. Names for the present, Lady Dedlock will not think me ill-bred, I hope. By the light of the fire, which is low, he can see, looking toward the moonlight. By the light of the moon, Lady Dedlock can be seen perfectly still. A townsman of this Mr. Rouncewell, a man in exactly parallel circumstances, as I am told, had the good fortune to have a daughter who attracted the notice of a great lady. I speak of really a great lady, not merely great to him, but married to a gentleman of your condition, Sir Leicester. Sir Leicester condescendingly says, Yes, Mr. Tulkinghorn, implying that she must have appeared of very considerable moral dimensions indeed in the eyes of an ironmaster. The lady was wealthy and beautiful, and had a liking for the girl, and treated her with great kindness, and kept her always near her. Now this lady preserved a secret under all her greatness, which she had preserved for many years. In fact, she had in early life been engaged to marry a young rake, who was a captain in the army, nothing connected with whom came to any good. She never did marry him, but she gave birth to a child of which he was the father. By the light of the fire can be seen, looking toward the moonlight. By the moonlight, Lady Dedlock can be seen in profile, perfectly still. The captain in the army being dead, she believed herself safe, but a train of circumstances, from which I need not trouble you, led to discovery. As I received the story, they began with an imprudence on her own part one day, when she was taken by surprise, which shows how difficult it is for the firmest of us, she was very firm, to always be guarded. There was great domestic trouble and amazement. You may suppose, I leave you to imagine, Sir Leicester, the husband's grief. But that is not the present point. When Mr. Rouncewell's townsman heard of the disclosure, he no more allowed the girl to be patronized and honored than he would have suffered her to be trodden under foot before his eyes. Such was his pride that he indignantly took her away, as if from reproach and disgrace. He had no sense of honor done him, and his daughter by this lady's condescension, not the least. He resented the girl's position, as if the lady had been the commonest of commoners. That is the story. I hope Lady Dedlock will excuse its painful nature. There is not much conversation, for late hours have been kept at Chesney Wold since the necessary expenses elsewhere began, and this is the first night in many on which the family have been alone. It is past 10 when Sir Leicester brings Mr. Tulkinghorn to ring for candles. Then the stream of moonlight has swelled into a lake, and then Lady Dedlock for the first time moves and rises and comes forward to a table for a glass of water. Winking cousins, bat-like in the candle glare, crowd round to give it. Volumnia takes another, a very mild sip of which contents her. Lady Dedlock, gracefully self-possessed, looking after by admiring eyes, passes away slowly down the long perspective, by the side of that nymph, not at all improving her as a question of contrast. And that is the end of chapter 40.